Hey,
I know.
just quickly, like the month that, like what I've been seeing here, like the seasons are a month ahead. I haven't heard anyone talking about that.
Yeah.
Like watching the
Oh,
plumage of
yeah.
the birds and the mating season and the da, 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 da. Like spring happened like in July here.
Yeah. Just for our Archaix, our Archaix crew who are here, I'll introduce you to Mr. Anonymous. There is Mr. Benjamin. He's one of my best mates. He's a very strange Kiwi, i.e. New Zealander, who lives in Australia, and he lives literally in the middle of the rainforest. He is out in the middle of
Nowhere.
nowhere. And when you will hear interesting sounds coming through his mic many times as all the birds and beasts come while flying through. And Ben is very much, he works with the local mobs, so the local Aboriginal groups. He is very involved with them and all the lore keepers with them. So yes, we always have, Ben and I have rather interesting discussions regularly. Yes. Jason, if you want to talk the whole thing about like the Origines lore, either whether you're talking about the New Zealand or Australia, you should definitely talk to Ben because he talks directly with the aunties and the uncles. So
I'd love to hear all of that.
some of the stuff he's not allowed to talk about, and we have to remind Ben that this is going up public. So
I respect the privacy of people's Indigenous law, but to the extent that they're happy to share, I'd love to hear all of that.
oh yeah, oh yes, Ben
Well,
has
Ben
had
is
stories.
so Ben, aren't you the one that Don's recently sent a coin to?
Yes, I have a coin.
Okay, so I know who you are. You're the unfortunate bastard that just had all the stuff burned down.
Yes.
Oh, that was I. Yes. But
Yes,
you know,
everything
phoenixes
burned to the
rise
ground.
from flames. Phoenixes rise from flames.
Yeah, I'm sorry to hear that, man.
Hey, we also connected him up with the One Talks. So our New Zealand friends.
Well, I can say about Australia, New Zealand, the entire Pacific, that whole Pacific area out there. I'm about to cover a lot of that in my new series, The Flood of Archaix, which is all about the Phoenix phenomenon, 1687 BC, because it's all connected. I am not an expert on Aboriginal traditions in Australia and New Zealand, but what I do know is that at that 17th century BC period right there, we have the documentation from the ancient world that the people of India, the Dravidians, used to walk to the kingdom of Dwarka, which is now hundreds of miles offshore and under the Pacific. The archipelagos, all the chains of islands out there in Indonesia, all of that was continent. They weren't islands. Much of the traditions of the Maori from the Micronesia, Melanesia, Polynesia, they say the same things. At one time in recorded human history, those island chains were much larger. And even Easter Island has a tradition that there is an island a couple hundred miles south of Easter Island or southwest. And there's a tradition that at one time they used to walk to that. So what we have is what David Hatcher Childress has documented widely is that the common denominator between the ancient Aboriginal reliefs, traditions, and the relics and statuary that have been found in Australia are absolutely connected to ancient Dravidian culture from 3,500 years ago. So the Aboriginal Australians, in my opinion, are absolutely connected culturally and racially to the Dravidian culture of India. And at one time, they literally walked back and forth. It was only in recent history, which is the last 3,600 years, that all that changed. And it's the reverse. May of 2040 is going to reverse what happened in the flood of Archaix. What happened in the flood of Archaix is the entire ocean bottom literally dropped. And at the same time that happened, South America, Andes Mountains were raised 12,000 feet elevation. This is why Lake Titicaca has freshwater jellyfish, freshwater sharks. Lake Titicaca has freshwater seahorses, crabs. All these things that have only been documented in saltwater oceans are all alive and well in Lake Titicaca at 12,000 feet elevation in the Andes Mountains because of this one event, which thrust Pumapunca and Tiwanaku to 12,000 foot elevation. So this exact same event also lowered the Pacific floor to turn continents like you guys are familiar with the traditions of Lemuria and Mu, like Churchward. In 1800s, there were a lot of writers who were putting out some really, really compelling arguments and archaeological basically studies showing that the Pacific wasn't near as empty as it is today, as it was in ancient times. It was packed with more land masses. And this isn't because the Pacific raised, not at all. It's because the ocean bed dropped. It's called subsidence. And the exact same mechanism is going to be reversed in 2040. That whole Pacific basin is going to raise back up, and it's going to be the Atlantic that drops. And it's going to be a total shift in the oceans. And this shift is what I recorded on my channel in a video with Martin Leakey from a book from 1871 called Cyclical Flood Theory, where this scientist in 1871 published a book explaining this mechanism, explaining how the two oceans exchange, they literally shift positions by something going on underground. When this happens, in May of 2040, we're going to see whole areas of the Pacific like Metalanin on Ponape Island, the Yap Islands, is going to raise back up. Already we can see the ruins underwater. Many people have documented that. There are hundreds of pictures on Google Images of Ponape Island. It's called the city of Metalanin. You can look at that now. Giant basalt rock columns, skeletons with huge long heads have all been found there. But we're going to get to see the whole city after May of 2040. Easter Island's going to be about 20 times bigger, and we're going to get to see all the other statues that you can't see today that are underwater and all those ruins. So,
Hey, Jason.
That's all. That's basically all. I really can't go into detail about the actual traditions of the Aborigines. I'm really focused on origins.
Ben, do me a favor. Hold on a second, darling. Ben, you were talking about here in the chat. You said the and I'm not going to try to say the word. The Maori.
Hawaii. It sounds like Hawaii, but it's Hawaii. Yeah. So the Maori origin story, Jace, is actually of a sinking island, and that's why they ended up down in New Zealand. But there is also some potential stories that can back up your horse people, that they may have ended up down there as well, the boat people. Because there's another tribe down there called Ngātuhoi, and they have green eyes and blonde hair, and they claim to be Phoenicians and genetically test thusly. So their story is actually from up in Phoenicia there, and it starts all the way up there a long, long time ago as they cruised down through South America into Rapa Nui or Easter Island there, and that's why they have the red hair things there. But I look forward to your South Pacific. Yeah.
Would that be sorry, Ben, would that be the Petaparahi backstory? Or is that separate?
No, yeah, that's another one too.
Okay. Never
mind. They're quite potentially the Picts originally, the Petaparahi. Yeah. So they're another one. It seems like there's a lot of people that ended up in New Zealand from the Northern Hemisphere.
I've got a question for Jason. You said that the floor dropped about 3,600 years ago. Is that what happened to a lot of the Atlantean and a lot of the islands, and the reason the U.S. and Africa and whatnot lost a lot of its coast?
Well, I mean, the flood of Archaix changed almost the entire surface of the Earth, all the coastlines. Like I said, one of the most compelling arguments of Polzanski from 1901 and 1902 concerning Tiwanaku is the fact that none of this is theoretical. I mean, fossilized marine forms have been found all over the Andes, the tops of the Andes Mountains, but the ancient coastline of Tiwanaku is very clear and it's very well documented. You can see where the fossilized beach was 3,600 years ago, where the city. You can see the ancient landings, huge stone landings where ships used to dock. All that is very clear. And for that to have happened in South America, then yes, we're looking at topographical changes all over the world. The Mediterranean, Africa, African coast. We're looking at a separation between the African coast and Madagascar. We're looking at a huge separation where what is that body of water, the Arabian Sea, which was almost completely covered in sand at one time, suddenly became a sea. And we have the opening up of the Indus, which the Indus drains today at an area that is several hundred miles away from the ancient coast. The ancient coast has been found underwater. It's been photographed. It is hundreds of miles out to sea. So yeah, we have huge continental changes from the event in 1687 BC. The flood. You're gonna see. By the time I get to the 4th and 5th video, you're going to see that the Ogaigian deluge literally destroyed the entire world. I mean, there's men like W.J. Perry who wrote a 550-page book just about the whole world dying in the year 1687 BC. I'm going to show you evidence that from the Americas, we have ancient American texts, Toltec texts that tell the story that the world suffered a 25-year darkness after this flood. And in the same 25 years, which is mentioned in the ancient Mediterranean legends concerning the flood of Ogaiges. So it's it changed the topography of the entire world. There's almost no one was untouched by this. And but the scary part is that we have so much historical documentation about the flood of Ogaiges, but the flood of Noah was 552 years before that and was supposed to be worse. And we have the evidence. We know where those civilizations are, but the problem is we don't have hardly any stories about it compared to the Ogaigian deluge, which tells you just how perfect that destruction was.
Well, when we lived in Malta, it was one of the things. We had lots of friends who were scuba divers. And whether you're in Malta or Greece, Israel especially, and Turkey, it is very limited to how much scuba diving you're allowed to do off the coast. And there's areas that are like out of bounds. You're not allowed to scuba dive there. You're not allowed to go down. You're not allowed to take boats out there with like the like ground penetrating radar, etc. And when you look, there is so much being, officially discovered now off the coast, like entire cities. If you go to Google Earth and you start, Nick and I have spent hours and hours with Google Earth, zoom right in and crawl across the Mediterranean coast floor. First of all the coastlines are blurred out, so you can't see anything near to the coastlines anywhere in the Mediterranean. But when you start looking, like, it's very obvious. Like, there's big straight lines that these are massive buildings. There were massive structures. There were obviously some kind of buildings that were huge and on the level of cities that were there, and they're just gone. Now the Mediterranean is there. Now, that's where the ocean is. Oh, sorry, the sea is. So, I mean, that's that history they don't want to talk about. That's that history they officially don't want to talk about.
Well, Danny, you can imagine they have a lot to hide. Let me give you an example. In the year 1900, sponge divers off the coast of Crete, off the small island of Antikythera, went down and they pulled up treasure from an old ship. When they pulled the treasure up, nobody really understood the value of what was found until 1902. In 1902, this box was pulled out from the treasure because it was unusual, and they opened it up. And they found what could have only been an ancient computer. So this has become famous. It's called the Antikythera device, or the Antikythera computer. And the scholar De Sola Price has spent his life researching this little device and this amazing find. But the differential wheeled mechanism and the alloys that were used to make this are far more sophisticated. The machining process to make these gears would have been more sophisticated than the device itself.
Yeah.
We're talking about a shipwreck that has been positively dated within a decade of 63 BC. That shows that they were making clocks and clock mechanisms and dials with not just gears, but differential gears. That's a whole different type of engineering science. They were making these in 100 years before Christ, which means that now we have to take into consideration what Herodotus and Diodorus Siculus and Strabo wrote. They've talked about ancient mechanisms like star labs that were able to compute the exact position of stars, planets, and the moon centuries in advance using these devices. And every bit of this was thought to be bullshit until in 1902 this device was cleaned off and they found exactly that. So I find it interesting that De Sola Price believes that the Greek moniker, there is a Greek moniker on the dial that shows that all astronomical reference points are zeroed out at a certain year in history. In the Greek, he believes it's targeting the year 584 BC.
Oh,
Zechariah
really?
Sitchin, yeah, he believes De Sola Price published this. I have it in my Chronicon, but he said he believes for some reason the Greeks think that the most important date of ancient astronomy was 584 BC, and the device was used to calculate periods before that and after that. Now, Zechariah Sitchin took that data, and because he's Jewish, and because he believes that the fall of Jerusalem in 585 BC is somehow connected to this device, he doesn't give any evidence for that, but he thinks the date moniker is 585 BC. I've called both of them out as being wrong because the only thing astronomical that would have been important at that time in history is the year that Thales of Miletus predicted the darkening of the sun by a mechanism that was not the moon. And it actually happened in the month of May of 583 BC.
And I just wondered if, Jason, you had any perspective or any other sort of source material for that that I could look into, because I agree with it. What you've said, Danny, makes absolute sense in terms of why it's done and the power of doing this disgusting thing. But I'm interested to know what this historical source material might be that I could explore.
Well, you would there is no question that the Puranas, the commentaries on the Vedas, the Atharva Veda, the Rig Veda, these texts are based off older traditions and older fragments of texts and monumental inscriptions that are far older than anything that has ever been written in the Bible. 100% of the Old Testament derives from Babylonian and Assyrian libraries that themselves, some of them were taken from older traditions that were in Sumerian texts, but they were very polluted by the Babylonian priesthood. Now, the Brahmic covenant, the covenant of Brahma, we have to put these into their sequential perspective. Brahma was way before Abraham. Abraham is a Judaic hijacking of a much older belief system. The Brahma and Saraswati traditions far antedate anything that is Babylonian or later pseudo-Babylonian, which we call Judaic today. Make no mistake, the Jews are basically a Babylonian belief system that has been transposed through Semitic filters into what we call basically a fiction. Hebrew is a fiction. There was never a Hebrew culture. It's these Edomites who later became known as Jews when they were captive in Babylonia, they went through the old Babylonian libraries in the 6th and the 5th century of BC. It is very well documented by scholarship how the Old Testament was put together. It's not even mysterious. It's not. But when it comes to the Judaic culture and this whole covenant of Yahweh, you're dealing with a people who are taking older belief systems and writings and incorporating them as their own and rewriting them. Elements of the original faith is in Genesis, and it's all about Brahma. They changed the name to Abraham. This is why they even confused it more by saying that Abram's name was changed to Abraham. That's not even the truth. The truth is that his name was changed to Abraham from Brahma. Brahma is the original. His wife Sarai had a name change, but that's not true. That's the Jewish version. The real version was her name was Saraswati, and she was the consort, the half-sister and wife of Brahma. And this is what you find in the Hindu traditions. So we have this ancient belief system which applied to all peoples, and it was for all peoples. It's not even fixed on culture or race, the old faith in Brahma and Saraswati. But then we have it rewritten and incorporated into the Old Testament, and now it's very racial. And now it's not only racial, but it's human hating. And it is a complete incorporation of the institution of human sacrifice. This human sacrifice narrative that's found all throughout the Old Testament. Remember, different Israelite leaders were forced into positions where they had to sacrifice their son or their daughter to achieve something, or to make different populations immune to something. This is a part of the narrative of the Old Testament. The whole Bronze Age institutions of human sacrifice was very well and alive at these times. But this isn't the older Aryan traditions, the older Aryan faiths that took root in Mohenjo-Daro and Larak in the Indus Valley. These ancient, you understand, you have to put this into context. This religion of humanitarianism, this religion of peace, came from the one area of the world where archaeologists have been baffled that the cities were designed as luxury cities that had no walls, no fortifications, no armor, no chariots, no elements of warfare, no weaponry of any kind. The cities of Mohenjo-Daro, Larak, Harappa, all that civilization in the Indus Valley, they were living like humans were supposed to live, when suddenly they were wiped out and they were spread out. And some of those survivors made it to Babylonia, Assyria. Some of them stayed in Elam, and under a new ruler named Chedorlaomer, they fought for empire against Sargon of Akkad, and later Amraphel and Hammurabi. And some of these survivors fled into northern India, and they mixed in. Others made it to Urartu. Some made it to Rashamra and Ugarit. This great cataclysm sent all these people everywhere, but it was about 500-600 years later where the narrative had turned darker, and now this older faith had been corrupted, and these priesthoods, especially out of Babylonia, from which the Jewish scribes copied everything, had instituted not only human sacrifice, but had also instituted the temple program, where the priest was the mediator between God and man. This almost every element of the old Brahmic religion is undermined in Babylonia. Babylonia promotes almost the exact opposite. And it's the Roman, it's the Christian, and it's the Judaic faiths that copy the Babylonian version, not the Brahmic, not the older religion of peace and humanitarianism.